Go.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, councillors, members of the public who have joined us not only here in council offices but also online. This meeting has been held here in SWDC Council offices. It has been live streamed and will be available to view on the council's YouTube channel at a later date. The health and safety, we have emergency exits through the door that we came in from and the front entrance of the council building. It's the assembly area on the road across.
On the Barney Kindergarten.
Okay, the assembly area is on Broadway Street, around to the side of the council offices in the front of the child or daycare centre. Thank you, if we should need to use it. And we remain in that position until the building has been cleared, confirmed clear. Have we got the colour here? Can you see? Oh, Councillor Gray, it would be great if you could see out the next. Welcome.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Ki mā kena ki puta, ki a mā taratara ki kawa. E he ake ana ki atakura, te o he puka, he omu, te he mawuriwa.
Thanks, Councillor Gray. Apologies. I have an apology from Deputy Mayor Councillor Melissa Sadler-Footer. Are there any other? Also, thank you, Councillor Macaulay and Andrea Brutini, who is member of the Maori Standing Committee. My apologies for and early departure apologies for Mayor Martin. Thank you. Anyone?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Who would like to move to accept those apologies? Councillor Gray, who would like? We have a seconder, please. Councillor Woodcock, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. Thank you. The motion is carried. Councillor Maynard, just if you wish, thank you. Just please put your hand up, and I'll try to notice it. Or if I don't notice it, hopefully someone else around the table will recognise you wanting to provide input. There is no public participation scheduled today, and we have no actions from public participation. Is there any extraordinary items of business? None that we're aware of. Now, we'd just like to confirm the minutes from our last infrastructure community services committee meeting, which was held on 25th of July. Can I have someone to move to accept those minutes as true and correct, please? Thank you, Councillor Gray. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bosley, thank you. Any comments on, is someone on the move? No comments? Okay, all those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, motion is carried. Now that's one thing I think to cover off, Amy, was we only got partway through the agenda. So do we need to go and discuss the remaining portions of that agenda in this, or we just take it as read?
You know, it's like we've got some items that will be repeated, so like the update report, the action items, we thought we had a chairperson that there was Councillor Woodcock's members. So, and there were some recommendations there. So, if you just wanted to receive each report, then
Right. Okay, fine. I think the remainder of our last agenda, we will thoughts on just accepting those as being read, I think, but we still have, we've included Councillor Woodcock's members report on the back end. We have included on the back end of the current agenda, so we have included that on the back end. we got some more another member's report from Councillor Gray as well. So we'll discuss that later in the back end of our agenda. And action items will follow through.
Do you want to receive all the reports?
Okay. So we'll receive all the reports from the agenda from the 25th of July now. So we'll receive those, all those reports from that agenda. Who would like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Gray. Thank you, Councillor Woodcock. And, any discussions? So now to move to decision reports from Chief Executive Staff and the joint review of Martinborough wastewater treatment plants, which is C1 in the agenda, and that is page 39. Thank you. So thanks, Robin, for working with Wellington Water on this report. There's quite a bit of detail there, which you've shared with us previously. Stefan, would you like to introduce who people are speaking to this?
Oh, I think Robin's probably best placed to speak to this, but Chair, just to note that this was a thorough review undertaken at CE level. Both organisations looked hard at themselves, and we believe that the recommendations will result in this kind of risk not occurring again in the way that it did. And we've already begun the implementation of the recommendations within our business practices.
Great, thanks. Robin, what would you like to add?
I think probably that the report speaks for itself with the number of recommendations and observations that we put in place. And as Stephen mentioned, many if not all of those have been put into train and to implement already as improvements in practices and procedures. And so I welcome any other questions or additional questions after the briefing and of the reading of the report.
Thanks, Greg. Councillors who has questioned of Robin or Stephen or Lawrence Wellington Water, who's online here with us. Councillor Woodcock.
Thanks, Chair. You on the CapEx dashboard for the wastewater. So we had a huge overspend in May in year to date, and the forecast for the full year overspend is quite large, $892,000 on an asset that is badly failing. So I was wondering, what was all that money spent on? Where's it gone? Bearing in mind this, it's 3.5 months old too. The document. CapEx, yeah.
The majority would be spent on the Featherston wastewater treatment plant project and the preparation of the application. In fact, I think almost all of it last year was spent. This is the May report.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be the Featherston wastewater treatment plant application.
So is concerning for the full year, it's nearly $900,000 overspent. Does that mean it's ahead of schedule?
So it's
Well, the bills are varied, the variance, so forecast budget. variance on the forecast, the budget, and to what is forecast to be spent. So I would think the budget is what we had the money for, so the variance is no expenses and so the top of the budget.
We certainly brought forward some budget from this fiscal year back into the previous fiscal year, which that report is reflecting of $150,000. The Featherston project is on budget. Yes.
Yeah, I think, councillor, a good place to look is also the monthly Featherston wastewater treatment plant consent updates that we email out, and that will reassure you that the budget for that project is well on track.
Are you talking about the pump station overspend?
No, all wastewater is $892,000.
Okay, if you come down, the bigger overspend is 565 in the pump stations, which I'm assuming is the Donald Street pump station, which was brought forward.
That's correct.
Yes.
Which we voted for on the annual plan to bring that forward, and we're getting the rising main done as we're part of that, which was an opportunity that we didn't have. You remember that conversation?
Yeah.
So that's where that overspend is. So it's not no expenses. It's been brought forward.
Councillor O'Connor.
I'm just really interested in the relationship issue that we've got with Wellington Water, and to me this is the crux of the problem. But and I know in the report it talks about a misunderstanding of the relationship of Wellington Water with us, and that you think that we see you as a contractor, and so then there's that adversarial sort of approach. Now some councillors might think like that, but I do recall many times over the last 4 years saying to Wellington Water that as our advisors, we need to treat you as you are ours, and that you are actually our advisors. So that adversarial thing, I think, is potentially because the advice we've been getting either hasn't been communicated in a way that reflects a small rural community, or perhaps not having any staff actually sitting over here in the office to interpret what you're saying and to make sure that it is kept front of mind may well lead to a lot of that problem. So my long-term question, I suppose, is how do you manage this relationship with councils over the hill? Do they have dedicated staff on site to manage that relationship, which we're trying to do on the Swellability Brag? So are we missing something fundamental to how we should be managing this relationship?
Just to chip in there before Lauren's responds, councillor. We just to point out that we do have staff on site. So Adam Matson is employed by Wellington Water and is a very valuable member of staff who helps us communicate with the Greater Wellington Water Limited organisation. He works here. And of course, our colleagues in Wellington Water are really available to us, including visiting us whenever we need. So just to make that point before you come in, Lawrence, if you've got anything to say.
Yeah, I would just support what you said, Stefan. And in terms of what the relationship with the other councils, very similar. So we just have one client relationship manager that links directly with our client council representative, we call them, which is effectively the Stefans of the other councils. And if anything, I would say South Wairarapa perhaps has more than the other councils in terms of Adam Matson, as Stefan mentioned. So more than happy to talk to councillors on any subject whenever you would like.
But if I could make an observation that the very term you use for that person, client relationship manager, suggests that you are a contractor rather than us. Because we're not your client. You are. So the language itself creates that impression that there's a disconnect between us.
Yeah, and we're keen to do whatever we can to resolve that disconnect. So.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the one comment from an earlier meeting, I think, council, was where we were. It had been picked up about a council employed staff member. I think is that what you're referring to?
That's sort of what I'm.
That's the interface between Wellington Water. Yeah, that's so. With that in mind, Lawrence, are you aware of the any of the other councils in the Wellington region under Wellington Water Limited that have an interface kind of role employed by council to work with who is a technical person? Because I think that's where the what you're referring to, isn't it, council? I don't wish to put words into
that's
to as a technical person to work and be that conduit with Wellington Water's expert advice.
So I guess we have various interactions with council staff at different levels, but not necessarily one specifically designated as a key contact point, if you like, other than as I described earlier. So sorry, I'm not sure if that really answers your question.
I suppose, I can only talk over the last 4 years, that when I look back on this relationship, it has always struck me that something is missing, and exactly what you're saying. That there just seems to be a disconnect between what is being sent to us via email or whatever, and then how it's being received and or transmitted and kept front of mind, perhaps. It is the biggest single spend we do, and it is the one that probably creates the most sleepless nights for most of us. Because I'm probably not speaking out of turn that every time it rains here, I wonder if I'm going to see on the front page a sewage spill in Featherston, for example, and we've had a lot of them. So somehow we need to keep the information that's coming into Stefan and his team front of mind. And I just wonder whether we are, we're a small council and we're doing things on the smell of an oily rag. Are we understaffed in this area in our council? Do we need somebody dedicated in the water sphere? Absolutely on staff.
I think it would be fair to say, councillor, so that there is a lot to be learned from the recommendations and our current levels of internal resourcing to provide that interface is certainly something that needs to be looked at. I wouldn't take that as a definitive yes, but it is something that we should be certainly exploring.
And even if the 3 waters or 10 waters or whatever happens, it's the same. We're still going to need that interface somewhere between Russell's development and Towns and Stefan doing the operations and how that's going to interface. And Wellington Water is, in terms of looking at the 3 water concept, whatever it's called now, this is probably sort of an example of what it's going to be like going forward, I would have thought. Not exactly, but it's going to be that disconnect between local councils and the big entity, whatever it looks like. So do we need to be preparing now with our long-term planning to have somebody embedded in council who's going to be that interface?
I think in response to that, councillor, we've got an opportunity, yes, to be looking at that. Bearing in mind, we have the elections a couple of months' time. So there's clearly uncertainty around affordable water reform agenda as it currently stands. We don't know what it's going to look like if we have a change of government. Whatever we do have, though, we know even if we had a continuance of the current reform programme, that for the next 2 years at least, we're going to have a like for like as part of our long-term plan. So we certainly need to be looking at resourcing to make sure that we get that assurance that council is required.
Thanks. Martin?
Just picking up Alistair's question, I can confirm that some, but not all of the municipal councils have staff employed who would be able, for example, to peer review engineering. And B, one council would have sufficient staff that once we go to contract, will purchase its own water solutions, it's able to do that. But more fundamentally, these people are able to provide the council with what I call wise purchasing advice. Because I think what you're hinting at is that we are often making decisions in the dark.
Yeah, not so much in the dark, but possibly not. Possibly not moderated for a rural environment. So, and that interpretation of a very big organisation advice down to a very small organisation, which is terribly constrained by the budget. How do we turn that advice into something that we can, and if I use the example, Laurence, that when we got the 10 options for the Featherston wastewater treatment plant 2 years ago, and one of them was $160 million or whatever it was, and we looked at you as if you were off the planet. So it's turning that sort of advice into something that is more practical, that is actually understandable within the context in which we operate.
But even our neighbouring cities can say exactly the same. Or someone.
Certainly, thanks, Mayor Martin. Certainly reading through that report, and I recognise there were some some comments in there that SWDC no longer held the intellectual knowledge of our 3 water systems, and that had been divested or passed on to Wellington Water. I feel that we're at a disadvantage because of that. I think while Robin does a great job as our principal advisor in the water transition space, she's done a great job working this report and pulling it together with Charles. Like Alistair, I'm just wondering as to whether we need to have someone on staff working beneath Stefan to work that in the liaise between Wellington Water and Council. And I'll be keen to see going forward how we can perhaps fix that.
I think the other part to this is we've got to remember that as councillors, we are effectively paid for 1 day a week in terms of what we're there to do in a small council like this. And that 1 day a week is not just dealing with water, it's dealing with every facet of the district.
Of the organisation.
Right? So if you look at Wellington, for example, some of their councillors, all they will focus on would be water. That's it. And they pay $150,000 a year or whatever they pay. But we've got to get across it. So the chances of stuff slipping through the cracks with councillors remembering what we did last week, let alone 3 months ago, the chance of forgetting that is really, really high. So I would suggest that possibly we need more staff on this to keep those things running, that we can't possibly remember every single little briefing, and Stefan, or respectively, what you say we've been briefed. I listened to your briefs, and then I listened to Russell's briefs, and then I listened to what's happening in a garden somewhere. And so, it's just so much compressed into a little period of time. So we actually need staff to make sure that these things are kept front of mind for us, because we're not doing this 7 days a week.
Well, if there's any through Mr. Chair, it's refreshing and reassuring that you are raising this in terms of appropriate resourcing. We want to do a good job. We want to provide sound advice. We want to work with our partners and make sure that you have sound and timely advice. And we certainly believe that, there are certain areas of council operations where we are under resourced. And this is certainly something that's spotlighted how we could offer that surety better moving forward. So we will certainly be bringing those workforce planning suggestions to council for conversations about a long-term plan.
You're just wondering if there's perhaps a further discussion we can have. You sent out an email this morning, Paul, about long-term plan levels of service discussion, and perhaps we can pick that up on that.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Councillor Maynard, you've got your hand up. Sorry, I didn't see it earlier.
Hey guys, look, just really quickly, I think something else as well, you know, we've got the recommendations there, and I think it's really important that when things like this are there, and you know, so they've been noted down, and yet nothing was kind of fed back, and I think that you know, so the end product was being able to actually have that information to know what to do. And to have it there for ourselves to be able to look at how it's going to fit into any annual plan or long-term plan moving forward, because I think this whole process is about what we can put in place to move forward, you know, from now. So and one of the things is you know having the risk register, which is unreadable, like the amount of things that we actually have on there from Wellington Water, and they're in red, green, and yellow, you know, and it's really interesting because sometimes when we ask a question or pose a question on something that might be yellow or red, just wanting to get that updated, we're normally told that it's going to get, you know, they'll come back to us or so it's about just following through with that and making sure that that process happens, but also honestly, like, unless you actually can put it onto an A2 page where we can actually read some of the writing, you know, it's kind of off-putting when we have so much to actually go through, and sometimes those are really just hard to actually read and navigate. And so, you know, looking at things like that and just being a little bit more, I guess, realizing that sometimes something may slip through that way as well. But so it is really important to actually have the conversation, I think, around those things, and not just be putting them on there and expect us to have been able to pick it up, because sometimes you just can barely even read what's being written on there. That's just my 2 cents.
Councillor Maynard, thanks, Steve. Just a couple of last questions from myself. Robin and Lawrence, observation 4, it talks about the project is already underway to address the issue, which has been led by the lead advisor, information management. So that's under observation 4, which relates to the corporate knowledge not being retained. Is lead advisor information management, is that an SWDC or Wellington Water Resource? SWDC?
It's SWDC, yes.
And what sort of timeframe was?
It's we had an executive team meeting this morning, and that staff member reported to us on our new information management policy, which we just adopted this morning, which sets the basis of all of our future management of our information. So we've got the foundation there. The next bit is around implementation. It was one of those things that you, if you didn't, you know, which one to do first? Do you do the chicken or egg? And there's the, well, you need the policy before you can actually set the standard in order to build on it. So now we've got the policy, we can now start to build on it. We expect that it's a progressive program of work that is going to take some time, because we are, to put it gently, in a state of immaturity as an organisation in terms of our information management, but it's expected to take place over the next 2 years, and so it's that big a piece of work.
Great, thanks. Great. If there's no more discussion or no more questions from councillors, we have a mover to receive SWDC and the Wellington Water Joint Review Report. We'd probably do this all in one lot. So move to receive the report, accept recommendations listed 1 through 4, endorse the observations listed 1 through to 4 in the report. Note that observation 1 in the report has been achieved. Note that observation 4 is underway. And note that the recommendation 3, which is the review of the connection process, has been initiated with SWDC, Wellington Water Planning and Land Development Groups. Who would like to move? Thank you, Councillor Plummer. And Councillor Gray, would you like to second? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say no. Thank you, Councillor Maynard, for voting aye. Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to before we move on to the next matter on the agenda. Or is this joint review report now available to be released, publicly released
Yes,
to media?
yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's in public.
Domain now?
It's out now.
Great, thanks. I thought that was an important match.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
To share with our communities the work that has been done to date. So,
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And if I may, it's the speed in which it was turned around was important for us as well. To give that confidence and assurance to the community that we're onto the problem.
thank you. Now considering item C2, which is paper regarding the footpath on the northern side of Farley Ave and West Street, Grayson. And that's a report from Russell and his team. Mr. O'Leary, would you like to add anything to this?
No, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just the responded to your 2 question points this morning, and if you would to share that as part of the problem solving or considerations.
Right. On that email, Russell, sorry. Sorry, Russell. Just to let everybody know, I asked followed a couple of questions through to Russell, and in the report, page 67 refers to the second to last paragraph in section 6. So there's a discussion there about stop paragraph down, and there's discussion there about an alternative course of action, and that not installing the final portion of the footpath, and council therefore not being in accord with the components of the relevant structure plan. And I asked what the consequences would be for council for not complying with the components of that structure plan. Russell's come back to me to say that the council would be at odds with an earlier council resolution publicly notified plan. That plan was original plan was consulted on and anticipated by residents, and our roading managers indicated that footpath should be installed. And if we did not go through with the plan, we would then have to go through another resource consent not to install the path and consult with the affected parties. And the second portion of second question that I asked was page 68 under paragraph 9 that says financial construct considerations, and it's noted there that the construction cost of the footpath is approximately 25k. My question was what's in the cost of land purchase hadn't been included in there. So I was asking the question as to what would the likely land cost be, and Russell's come back saying that the last valuation, which was done in June last year, indicated that the land cost was approximately 51,000 K. Yeah, 51,000. And was that going to, what budget would that come out of, Russell?
Well, it's all part of footpaths,
Okay.
part of roading provisioning. So within the report, in liaison with that, he's indicated provision of coverage for the costs within current budget. So you may wish to ask him a further or subsequent question on that, as he's online, I believe.
Was that stretch, was that not purchased by the developer at the time?
No, no, it wasn't designated. And that point is made under on page 66, second paragraph.
Yes, it didn't install it. But it doesn't say it didn't purchase it at the time as part of the overall development of the area. So it didn't install it at the time, because obviously there was garages sitting on that bit of land and there were trees. But the developer would have still had ownership over that block as part of the original purchase. If you go down, I'm just looking down to the plan change on page 70. Surely that would have been included in the block within the plan change list.
Can you provide a response?
The actual construction of the footpath can come out of the road and operational budget. The purchase of the land, that would be run parallel to the upgrade of the adjoining streets, for example, Mole Street and Wood Street, which that project work was to be covered via financial contributions from the current development and future development. So I would think any costs associated with the development and the adjoining land and properties should come out of contributions.
I suppose we'll have to check and see whether contributions were made at the time, noting that they didn't meet the requirements of the designation at the time.
Yeah, well,
So it might not be an extra, whatever, $75,000 is. It might already be sitting in contributions.
yeah, the points raised by the developer, WestTech, have been noted, and the money's paid, and that has been aired previously in terms of how they see things and how potential payment, but it's something that can be further checked.
Check that out for you. Maybe it deserves. It's not going away.
Sorry, we're just going to me and Martin here.
Yes, I do. So,
Point to raise.
yes, this is a matter that Council Woodcock and I first started some time ago. Partly because the person who lives at 100 West Street was trying to sell their house and was unable to do so because of the uncertainty about what was the provisioning over the spit of land adjoining the trees. So certainly the person who lives there and her real estate agent believes that she owns the land, but is unable to sell it because of some uncertainty about the future status of the land. However, whether it's $25,000, $50,000, $75,000, and irrespective of where it comes from, one of the things that residents have made loud and clear is that they have grown tired of waiting spending on this council. And they often talk about, why did the council spend such and such on this nice to have thing or whatever. However, a concrete park isn't a nice to have, it's a bad to have. As Councillor Graves pointed out more than once, the world needs less impermeable surfaces of concrete. What the world needs more is more sponginess, the capacity of the land to soak up water that falls upon it. And as it happens, we're talking about a Barton Greytown, which has recently been designated again as an area subject to potential flooding. The other thing about it, however, is that the current section of its trees is immensely attractive. It's on a part of West Street being one of three main roads through Greytown. And opposite this particular section, well, it's really rather hideous actually. It's car park and car park and car park, and it's not at all attractive. Here's this little sort of beacon of what you would say is it's sort of nature at its best in an urban setting. The trees are lovely. One of the things that the council has done over the years is to adopt a policy of putting footpaths down one side of the road, but not down both sides. And as it happens, a lot of Farley Avenue and the particular section has got West Street on one side, it's got Farley Avenue on the other. Farley Avenue indeed does have 2 footpaths down a great deal of it, which again seems somewhat unnecessary. But certainly opposite this particular property, there is a well-formed, nice, smooth, accessible footpath, so people can push prams, ride their scooters down Farley Avenue in any time they want. So my view is that this is something that should not be happening. The council should make it clear to the owner that we don't wish to possess her property and that she's free to do with her property in the whole as she wishes. And if that requires a little bit of legal something or other somewhere along the line, then I would be keen to support that. But I'm not sure, to be honest, that a resource consent to do something requires me to do it just as I made it. And I'm not sure that we need to spend it. Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah, I'm very much with Martin on this. Questions here, do we really need a footpath to nowhere, because that's what it is when it gets to the edge of West Street, there's actually no footpath to connect it to. So my view is, what is the point? We're spending that money, 75, 50, 100, whatever it may be, it could be well spent somewhere else. This has been a very long, trying, stressful time for the owner. As her elderly mother was very ill, she wanted to move to be nearer to her. In the meantime, with this hanging over the property and she couldn't sell for quite some time, she's recently had to deal with the passing of her mother in the situation that she didn't really want to be in. So yeah, my questions are, do we really need this park in Oakley? Do we need to spend that money that can be spent elsewhere? Like Martin said, those trees, I know now that they've come to the conclusion they were going to cut them down and said, no, we don't need to anyway. But those trees and that little grassy bit on the corner actually are what make the whole outlook for that subdivision. You take that away and you change the whole perspective. That's my views.
Any other comments from?
Yeah, I think before we make a decision, we need to know whether the land's been one, vested in the council, whether there's money sitting in contributions as part of the sign off on the developer's point of view, and 3, what is our legal consideration given that this is being done into the district land and involved going through a hearing and previous council signed off on. So there's a whole lot of real quite gnarly issues that need to be resolved before you just say can't do this, because you might find that with the unintended consequences, as we might find it's a lot of them too. So I think there's some questions that need to be answered by Russell and the team first.
Yep. What I'll perhaps to move forward, shall we I'll ask for somebody to move to receive this report. So it's been tabled and on so do I have a mover?
Please proceed again.
Councillor Gray and Councillor Plymouth to second it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Maynard. That motion has been carried to receive the report. Shall we add, therefore, in light of this discussion, shall we have a second resolution here to agree to install the 1.8 metre wide footpath joining the edge of the road. So in light of the discussion, shall we do an amendment to?
We want to just defer it to the next meeting and allow the officers to come back with some questions to them.
Right, okay.
Then you do a resolution, just defer it.
Right, okay, in that case, we'll defer any further discussion on decision making on resolution 2.
You right with that, Russell? You know,
Thanks very much for that.
Can I make a point that just very briefly, with the report writing, picking up on the mayor's point about having more permanent services. Whenever we're looking at infrastructure stuff, there's a lot of, these reports come out with climate change considerations on here. I think we do need to have a more robust consideration of the implications of climate change when we're talking about permanent infrastructure. So it would be really nice to see that coming through in the reports. So, yeah.
Noted, thank you, councillor.
Great. Now we're on to just note that Mayor Conley is just vacating at 2:22 p.m. Now we're going to move on to D1, the information reports from our Chief Executive Staff, and D1, which is the upgrade from partnerships and operations group. Do I have a mover to receive the update of the partnership into operations group? Thank you, Councillor Gray. Could I have someone who could second that? Thank you, Councillor Plummer. All those in favour to receive the report, please say aye. Councillor Maynard, all those against, please say no. Motion is carried. Stefan, Mr. Cook, would you like to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, in water, there's a couple of things which are positive. One is that the abatement notice, the cease abatement notice, Martinborough wastewater treatment plant has been lifted and replaced with 2 do's. That essentially means we're making progress and building trust with the regulator on our compliance plan and the implementation of that compliance plan. It doesn't mean that we can reconnect or accept any new connections, but it means that we are moving forward as we plan on a pathway to remediate and then eventually, of course, the new abatement will be released and we'll be back. Another piece of good news is that is in the capital program where we've nearly finished a very large piece of capital installation. The Donald Street pump station is on track to be online in October. This pump station itself is installed. The storage tank is installed. The rising main is installed. That whole thing is running on time and on budget. Of course, it's an important piece of tech.
You have seen Adams's photo was taken. It wasn't buried underground.
It wasn't.
But just before you carry on, Stephen, what's the total value of that project?
It's 5.8 million.
The Donald Street?
Down before. I think that wasn't
The
Donald Street.
I don't think it's 5 million.
It was the pumps. It was
No, the rising main was originally 800,000, and the which they combined with the Donald Street pump station.
I don't have it right from me either, sorry.
Because it would just be great to sort of put that out there that council has significant investment, a significant dollar value in Featherston to remedy a lot of those, or some of the issues that have been occurring in Featherston for a number of years.
It's right up there because the scope is bigger because they've got the holding tank that wasn't originally part of it. So certainly a massive project.
Chair, we certainly will be making public statements and involving you, of course, which would outline the investment unit and the impact that this new infrastructure is going to have.
Thanks, that'd be great, because that's just a good, that's a good news story for council to hear with our whole community and district. In writing, Chair, we're
enjoying some good weather. The land is drying out thanks to the wind and sun. That means we're starting now to catch up on delays that we've been experiencing, mainly due to the enormous amount of emergency works that we've been doing. I think we did about $3.5 million worth of emergency works in the past 12 months, which is almost the same as our roading budget. So as we start to get on top of that work, we'll be more proactive. You'll see this pre-seal repairs being done so that we can then seal. We'll be getting on top of vegetation control, because right now is a really important time for that. We'll be doing more drains and tables. And you will notice that we've now got an arrangement with the contractor to give us some photos and explanations of work that's been done on the network. And we'll be starting to, or we have started to publish those on our social media. It just gives the public a little bit more visibility of the kind of work that we're doing over time. And just finally, on the LTP planning, I'm sure you're thinking about that. We've got Wellington Metro has been briefing you on the context and strategic environment. That'll inform a preliminary investment plan, which will be used to talk about service levels. That's all based on our asset management plan, of course. In roading, we have submitted our new land transport plan. That's a 3-year plan, and that includes an investment plan and also low cost, low risk activity bids. And that information will be very useful to construct LTP levels and to extrapolate out over a 10-year horizon for LTP levels. So in water, what I'm saying in short is that in water and in roading, we've been doing important work to lay the foundations for our LTP service levels. Look, I won't waste time anymore with going through the report. I'll take the rest of it as read, and I welcome any comments and questions. Thank you.
Great, Councillor.
So I've got two, it comes up a couple of times. One is the green space and breakdown. I just want to make the point that whilst it's talking here about the relationship with Greytown Trust Lands Trust, the council potentially taking over a lease or otherwise does not increase the overall square inch of green space. It is literally one step of a whole lot of dominoes that need to be ticked off, because it makes the language used sort of says, oh, this is solving a green space issue. It's not. No, it's not adding any green space. It's just rearranging the chairs on the Titanic so that we can go to buy more green space in time. So it's just really important that councillors who haven't been over the background of this understand that.
So Councillor, before you move on to your next point, can I just ask, and it says here that we're going to get a paper coming to council regarding green space in Greytown. How far along are discussions to date?
Yeah, so through your chair, I couldn't agree more. This is not a solution for green space in Greytown. It is an important step towards that, though, because the first step of achieving a lease on the grounds and understanding with the Rotary Club about how that's to be managed, and then being available for multi-use, then allows us to take the next step, which is to consider an expansion of green space. Now, I haven't mentioned what that looks like in here because it's sensitive. But this options paper that is mentioned here is going to be council on the 27th in a week's time. So it is on track, Chair.
Yes, I need a little bit more context to it. So the last 3 years ago, if you recall, the trust was going down the line of potentially selling all their green space that they had in Greytown. The community was adamant that it was publicly owned. Rugby Club had a 99-year lease on the perpetual lease on the ground, as did the Bowls Club. So since that time, there's been an election, obviously, not only for council, but also for trustees of the trust. The view of the trust has changed in terms of they want to give commitment to the community going forward. That this is actually community effectively land owned by the trust, but for the community. But they want to see greater use of the land rather than having it locked up for just the Bowls Club or just the Rugby Club or just the Cobblestones, and to give long-term security to all the current tenants of those lands, for a better term, but also to say how can we expand this with them. So that's what this first stage is about coming to council and saying, here's this block of land, here's the lease arrangement. And there's been a lot of conversation between our officers, between not just the trust and our officers, but also the trust and the Rugby Club and the Rugby Club and the council officers to get all this stuff together.
Lined up.
There's a whole lot of things from a Rugby Club's perspective about how the grounds are run, how often they're going to use them, what else would either advertising, that goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of infrastructure in those grounds that actually has been bought and paid for over many, many years by the Rugby Club. And so how will all that work? Who's going to mow, right down to who's going to mow the grounds. So there's been a huge amount of work between the three organisations getting to this stage. We're at the stage now to sort of say, yes, good, council's happy to take this on the conditions that they've agreed, so that we can get this particular part done, which then opens up the door to then do the next stage, which is actually to look at how do we increase green space, because it's getting tighter and tighter as the population grows. It's not going away, so we need to move on that. So this is just that stage.
Great, thanks. Councillor Woodcock, would you like anything to add to that subject?
I've got some whole stuff on Big Mum's report, but yeah, the Rugby Club, all I've got here is it was actually in the one from the meeting before went over the wording, I said wording it says to help increase capacity. Well, that's not correct. It's not going to increase any capacity. It would be better off if that report said something like to ensure the continuity of green space. That's but just on the Rugby Club's behalf of they're keen as mustard to get this sorted out as quick as they possibly can, and more than happy to share the grounds. It's always actually officially been known as the Great House Sports and Recreation Ground, and where it is, it was known as the Red. We used to play cricket there as well. The soccer club use it for trainings. Now the baseball tend to go there. It's just a matter of getting all this sorted out so people don't have it hanging over their heads.
Great, I look forward to council meeting next week with that paper come forward. Thank you, Stephen. Alistair, you had another point you were going to raise before I projected.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask Tim, you talked about we won't meet the 5% ceiling. How far will we get? We had that really good workshop. Talked about how under investing we are in roading. So what sort of percentage are we getting to?
Less than 4% under the current budget.
Okay, so that effectively means we're sweating the equity from 20 years to about 23 years or something like that.
Yeah, close to 25. We're sweating the asset at 20 years, but we can manage that. Rule of thumb is somewhere between 15 and 20 years.
But now by going to only 4% or less than 4%, we're now going to be pushing that beyond 20 years.
Yes, we have the last 2 years. In fact, I don't think we've had that target more than once in the last 5 years.
Okay. And if we were to get back to the average 5% ceiling, I presume that that's the sort of figure you'll be coming to us for the long-term plan. To how do we get it back to that level, assuming that's the council's agreed status, which is 20 years.
Yes, and to get back, we've got to go greater than 5%. Otherwise, we're just treading water. So draft budgets are sitting around 6% in length. as a catch-up mode, and that may be a 3 to 5 year pain.
And the other part of that is our 5%, our 20-year life expectancy, is that the same as which Carterton is working on as well, given that all the roads are connected?
Yes, yeah, they've got a luxury that they're there already. But I think the likes of Marston and further north are probably looking around about a 15-year life.
Right, so we're on the high side of sweating.
Yeah, I think our average seal life last year we sealed was at 27 years.
Jesus. Not surprising, we've got a few potholes in.
And through you, Chair, I think that is probably consistent across many of our asset classes, and it does mean a lot of failures, and you will see a significant uplift being asked for in the next 3-year plan as a consequence of that.
I think maybe if we have Tim's presentation to us that he did a few months ago as part of our long-term planning, which was very good, and will refocus everybody's mind about why he's asking for that. It's something good. Perhaps as part of that, one of the workshops.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
I think it would be fair to say for you, Mr. Chair, that there's actually there's going to be a little bit of a reality check. We're going to present to you what we feel is our best possible view of the world, and it will be down to councillors to make some choices based on those options, that information that we give to you. But it is an incredibly challenging time in the economy, and we absolutely recognise that. But I think it was yourself, Councillor Plummer, pointed out as part of the annual plan process, we're in quite a catch-up period, and in terms of previous historical underinvestment.
Thanks. Councillor Woodcock.
I think so, Chair. Just got a couple of things. One on the roading, the 86.2% funding on average for the emergency work. So I presume, Tim, that's a pretty good outcome.
Yes, it's very good. But bear in mind that 82% is slightly bent because there was quite a bit of emergency funding down Cape Palliser, which is 100% funded, and we will lose that in 9 months' time. The Cyclone Gabrielle Far events, they were gave an enhanced subsidy rate of 92% for last financial year. They'll drop to 91 this year. And any events which happen this year and we request additional funding for will be subsidised at 51% until they exceed $400,000, and then it goes to 71%. And it was, I suppose, another major national event. The government will get into its pockets again and subsidise at a higher rate, hopefully.
So the figures that you have there for OPEX and CAPEX, do they include the NZTA funding, or is that just the ratepayers' contribution?
No, the fully operational budgets inclusive of all funding sources. There's something else here too. The wheels part, probably a question for Stefan. In there, we were talking to the designers last night. So they said in their original remit for the design, you include the car park, and they've now been told not to include the car park because the council are designing that themselves. So is that an extra cost on top of, or is that still coming out of the $1 million budget, or?
Oh, that's the first I've heard of that, councillor. I might have to take that back and get an answer for you.
Yep, What's one of the things there? Also, this is going back to the last meeting one, Stefan, the report that from the last meeting that we never got to do because we ran out of time. On the C1, it says financial 10K overspend forecast. This is in 5.21. After unexpected events, expenditure of $240,000 is separated into its own category. So why is that being separated into a category after a large overspend in the last 2 years?
Sorry, I'll explain that. That's the 240 was the unexpected event, that was the where we had to take the overflow from Donald's Creek and take it away. So we took that out as an unexpected event, categorised it as that, so that we could actually see what that operation focus was.
Yes. That's good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
We're obliged to do that under our SO.
Oh yeah, there's a thing in there under the property leases about the Greydown Old Design Library, stating that Martin Borough Community Board are making decisions on it. I'm wondering why they're making decisions on the Greydown Old Library and we're not allowed to make decisions on Payne Farm.
Yeah, through, yeah. So council had started a public process to try and attract a new commercial tenant to the old library, to the old library in Sheldon Park. And we had several tenants approach us and were looking to occupy. But then some councillors and some members of the Greytown Community Board asked us to pause that process.
You can use my name, it's okay.
Councillor Bosley and others wanted to explore, I believe they want to explore alternative community use for the site. Now, that's been paused for a little while now. I think we do need to press on with that because you know, the revenue from that site we can make about $27,000 a year out of that site and rent, and we'll want revenue, of course. So I think that the conversation around community use and the use of that site needs to progress as quickly as possible, just so we can make a decision and garner that revenue if we can.
So the Martin Borough Community Board, is that a misspell or are they getting tied into this as well?
It'll be the Greytown Community Board. Thank you.
So Paul and I, we're talking about that tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon.
And the other property thing in there, it's the West Haven units in Greydown, the pensioner flats, is still got one unit unable to be used. There's 15 people on the waiting list for those houses. And I'm sure in the last financial meeting, they had actually quite a bit of money in the account for maintenance for properties. Is there any progress on getting that up and running?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the maintenance of the flats is a real challenge for council. We operate at a loss, and when you have a significant problem with a unit, as is the case with the one that you're referring to, which the repair of which would be over $100,000, we've struggled to find the budget to maintain the units. And I think, you know, this is a larger question for us that we will need to grapple with as a team, as to how we continue to be able to provide that social housing to our community and the best way to achieve that. Because at the moment, you know, to be honest with you, it's not cost efficient.
So one last question, and thinking there about cleaning for the libraries, it's got all of government cleaning. That sounds like another large corporate trying to take over in a small community. And as I've pointed out many times, I'm all for small businesses and local communities keeping work. Is that what is what it seems, or?
Councillor, all of government panels offer purchases, including including territorial authorities, the ability to procure at very reasonable rates from organisations that are verified and of a scale that will be able to do the work that we need them to do. So all the government is a good option to consider. That's not the only option, and I know you're passionate about local contracting, so that would be in the mix. So
is that when the cleaning, is that like internal cleaning, not cleaning the outside of the building?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, for me, the Olive Movement is an open tendering process, very inclusive, and on our website we do have our recently updated procurement policy, and it's a social procurement policy, and that means locally first. So that is really kind of stands out as being something really important when looking for local businesses to provide services to us. But that's what we adopted as a result of the recent review. We adopted a social focus to the procurement process.
So under that, all of government tendering process, local businesses able to sign up and be involved.
Absolutely. So all that's required of them, in fact, is that they register with the process, and then it offers some levels of surety to people looking for providers that they've gone through the basics, you know, that it's that they're a viable business, and you know they deliver quality.
Right, thanks for that. Thanks for those questions, Councillor.
I've got one more thing I just noticed.
So if you can quickly go, and then I'll go around the table so others who have the next.
Yeah, sorry, breakdown wall repair on foundations. That is probably the most underutilised, apart from the facades, just been shared. And I just wonder whether perhaps before we spend $154,000, we send it back to the community board and say, what do you want to do with this? Because there's a lot of other views on that building. The offices upstairs are very really mixed out. The acoustics are appalling. It's freezing cold. It's just a difficult space. It's a very, very difficult space.
You're making it sound delightful, Councillor.
Well, it's so maybe Stefan, maybe send it before we spend that money. Send it to the community board and say, is this money well spent, or should we look at something completely different for that site? Maybe save the facade for something, but actually look at what we're going to do, because it's not fit for purpose.
So through you, Mr. Chair, in response to that, I really couldn't agree more. I actually think it's part of the LTP discussion. It's a conversation around use of council assets, you know, and be smart about the assets that we actually have and how they're used, how they're maintained, so on and so forth. Because we do hold quite a bit of council assets, which of course, as we've found from this latest annual plan period, the cost of insurance has skyrocketed. And we need to have that strategic conversation. Yeah.
Thanks. We'll pause on that one.
Could I suggest, Chair, that the member has asked if we can revisit a budgeted item, and I'm certainly happy to explore that.
I think in order to actually formally revisit a budgeted item will require a resolution. So that is this, because it's already factored into the annual plan. So I'm just wondering whether we can't simply just pause. We actually have to go back and actually get approval from the state to actually say that it's no longer required, that piece of work.
Do we do a resolution saying that we are pausing pending consultation with Greytown Community Board,
How much consultation would be? Well, I don't know that.
or discuss, perhaps not consultation, but discussion. Greytown Community Board.
I think there's nothing stopping us not doing, saying anything more. And I go and talk to the Greytown Community Board, so that's probably the first step.
Yeah, so it would be an action by Mr. Chair that we speak with Greytown Community Board for their thoughts on that. So, yeah, probably steer that conversation. I'm sure.
Right, councillor Maynard, your hand up.
Right. Stefan, are we able to talk a little bit about the Martinborough Square lighting project? I'm assuming that so we've got the $200,000 budget, but somehow we're needing to find another 300. Is that right?
Through you, Chair. So I have briefed the Deputy Mayor and the Chair. Would you like to respond to that, Chair? Or would you like me to respond?
I just so everyone around the table, all the officers are aware, I've shared the information that the emails, the plan from Cara, the aerials, this sort of thing with our councillors and also with our Greytown, not our Greytown Community Board, our Martinborough Community Board. So certainly everyone around the table, Councillor Maynard, we're all aware of that information that you've shared with us.
Oh, great. Okay. So what was the particular question that Councillor Maynard would like me to answer?
Well, basically, I'm just wondering when we're going to get started on it. I'm sure you're aware that a few weeks ago someone was hit on the pedestrian crossing between Cambridge Road and the Square. It was on the weekend, and luckily no one was injured, but there were police there, so there should be a record. Also, I'm sure you're aware that someone that there was another accident on the Princess Street. You know, it's these concerns that we've had for a long time that seem to be coming to light. So I have concerns, and I just want to know when we're going to get started on those dark spots on the square to get those sorted. Really, that's what my main concern is. So if perhaps just some kind of response on when we're going to get started, because to me it looks like this is saying that we're putting it off until next year.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the issue here is that the heart of the issue here is that after the project manager came back to us with a costed work program, the estimated cost increased from 200,000 to 500,000. When we learned that, our judgment was that rather than making ratepayers pay for that whole amount, $500,000, that it was economically prudent for us to move that into the roading program, which would then attract 52% Waka Kotahi subsidy. And Waka Kotahi would pay for $250,000 of the project, which as you will appreciate, is more than 1% of rates. In addition to that, we're already dealing with a 20-week delay in procuring these lights that we need for the project, and this is something that is being experienced by people up and down New Zealand and is delaying some Waka Kotahi projects by up to 15 months. So given the delays that we've got in procurement, our advice is that we should move this project into the roading program. That would be for the first year of the LTP and save the ratepayer $250,000. I'm not immune to the need to get this done and the health and safety factors that underpin the projects. And I hear the frustration that you have that we haven't been able to achieve this project faster. But at the same time, economic management and making prudent decisions on behalf of the ratepayer is something that is really, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan.
I can appreciate that, Stefan. Obviously, we understand completely about trying to make the best decisions for our ratepayers. But I do just have another concern, and that's just the duty of care and the fact that the danger around the square and the fact that there are those areas. So what kind of mitigation because I understand what you're saying and about being able to get that support but it won't happen until the long-term plan. So what can we put in place to help alleviate any as a council, we know that our crossings aren't up to standard. So what can we do for now on those dark spots, which is around near where the Puki is, and which is around on that Cambridge side? It's got nothing, we know it's well lit, Kitchener Street and Jellicoe compared to those other two areas. What can we do to just ensure our community's safety? Are we looking at anything else in the meantime?
Chair, of course, I'm not telling you what to do, and this committee has the ability to spend the $500,000 from rate, draw it from rates, and spend it on a solution. That option remains available to you. Other things that we're doing to try and mitigate. The main one is repairing the internal lights in the square. Only one of 4 is operating at the moment. If those internal lights are operating, they do provide a little bit more illumination in the square, including onto the pavement. Other than that, we had a good session on this with the Martinborough Community Board recently. And a suggestion was made to try and mount a light on one of the adjacent buildings, or even perhaps in the trees, to try and just put light onto that dark area. And we continue to investigate that as well. Thanks.
Anyone else around the table want to add to that topic?
There's been like $200,000 we signed off on. It was 200,000, wasn't it? We signed off on for them. So if we wait and put it into the long-term plan for $500,000 in roading, so half funded, that 200,000 be transferred into that for that to cover it. So we're not sort of speaking it again. You know what I mean?
Thank you. The source of the funding would shift, Councillor, from where it was originally tagged, which was reserves, to Tim's roading services budget, which is a different budget.
Yeah.
And I have asked him to make sure, of course, that this project is properly earmarked in the land transfer plan that he's prepared.
I'd just like to, I've already shared and I've shared with Stefan my concerns and frustrations that this has been pushed back again. The Martinborough Community will certainly in the last over a 3-year period have been raising that the lighting constantly with the council unsuccessfully, and I would when we first came to council end of last year, and then the report was done at the beginning of this year, February, March, by operations and brought to the table. The discussion at that time was prioritising, I suppose, the 2 pedestrian crossings which were dark around the square, and also the one on Jellicoe Street. Now, sadly, the one on Jellicoe Street hasn't been addressed in this report or vice their option. but for some reason, all of a sudden, instead of just 2 pedestrian crossings around the square, it's grown to a project of 10 crossings, which some, and I know and certainly accept that all crossings within the district, not only around the square, but within the district, non-compliance. But my concerns remain like Councillor Maynard's, and I know the Martinborough Community Board hold concerns that those crossings at Cambridge Road and the crossing from the square to Oxford Street are still dark, much darker than the other crossings and a greater risk. And while the project manager has priced work on those 2 crossings plus the ones immediately adjacent at approximately 210,000, I have asked the question and I'm wondering why we cannot, we've already approved 200k in funds from a reserve fund. Why can't we just stage the whole project and do those 2 priority crossings immediately and perhaps carry on with the remainder of the crossings in that long-term plan and receive Wakataki funding for 50% of that cost at a later stage. I mean, we already know that all the crossings across the whole district are on, and I'd imagine in that planning that Tim has done with Wakataki moving forward over 3 years. I hope that some pricing and some planning has been put in place for crossings in their other communities to be upgraded as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think, and these are all very well points, and as Stefan has pointed out, certainly you have the ability to be able to prioritise, but I would just point out that, as it says in the report, we're still dealing with a 20-week delay in the procurement process for sourcing the lighting anyway. Obviously 5 months from now is going to take us into the other part of next year anyway. And then when you factor in the Christmas period as well, we are potentially looking at, quite a way towards the start of the new financial year. So, I just reinforce an earlier point of Stefan that the decision is, of course, entirely yours. But it's just something to be for in terms of we're still dealing with election.
Chair, thank you for the question. And this was covered in my response to you, but I will underline it again. The original decision by council was to replace all of the pedestrian crossings in the square by resolution. It wasn't to focus on 2 of them that are perhaps more dark than others. And changing the council's decision and doing a couple of them would require a decision. But I go back to the idea of being fiscally prudent. So if we bring in contractors to do 2 of the sites, and they're only doing 2 and then they go away, and then we have to bring our contractors and subbies and equipment back to do the remainder, essentially we are blowing the costs of the project out by making it into 2 different projects instead of doing it at the same time, which adds to the concern that we're not doing this in the most efficient manner, economically efficient manner.
Yeah, there's something else to do, Mr. Chair. Stefan and I have been revisiting a decision of course made by council on the annual plan period when we were working up towards setting the annual plan, and it's around the issue of project management costs as well. And I would just like to make this committee aware, because it's the most appropriate committee to bring it to, that actually there are 2 things which are on our agenda which are high priority to us, including this project, the other one being Ninkura Road, where a dedicated project manager would help manage some of those costs as well. And so whilst we completely respect the decision that was made, we've become increasingly fiscally aware as a result of the challenging situation that council finds itself in. And that's why I guess we're spotlighting it more. We just feel that we're right to do that.
Yes, Walker.
Stephen, or if we, for instance, were decided to do the fiscally prudent way Stefan's talking about, and run through the long-term plan, are we able to order all the lights and that, have them here ready to go, or does that not work like that with the working with funding? If you try and order stuff beforehand, is that, can we get them ordered, knowing that it's coming, the funding's coming, they'll have them sitting there for us ready to go right on that, soon as the 1st of June, sort of
That's assuming the council passes the long-term budget.
Well, that's the key issue.
Once we have a resolution and the budget's approved, we can make a repurchase.
So that then would be another 20 weeks to wait, which would therefore be 5 months from the 1st of July before, at the earliest, before the lights would arrive in the South Warwick.
If there was a council resolution on close to the end of the current financial year that allowed the advance purchase of the lights, then you can build it into time. So you're not waiting for that.
I think it's an important point, and why don't I get our creative hats on and talk with Tim about how we might avoid that what we read today. Yeah. Not quite sure how, but
Get creative. Yeah.
Councillor Maynard,
some yellow paint over the tube.
would you like to comment?
I'm not quite sure, because when we're talking about the creative hats, so are you going to bring something else to the table then, Stefan? You're going to have a look and just see what we can actually, I mean, that would be fantastic. That was what I was asking. What is in place to be able to mitigate this? So, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think that there could possibly be things, outside of the square. We can certainly raise it, but I do think that there has to be, because I'm sorry, but, from the time that it was raised, from the time that the money has, so and now being asked to put it off through till the following year, which, understand, there was pushback when we went to put this forward and we got it through anyway. So we would, and yet for some reason there's still nothing. So what can we do? That's just where I think we're at the moment. And I absolutely agree, and that we need to do it, with a fiscal responsibility to our ratepayers. But exactly as Councillor Ealams has said, is that the funding that has already been approved and is already there. I understand that you're saying, bringing people back and doing all of that. I totally get it that then there is an additional cost, but I just want to know how we're thinking outside of the square, and it almost sounds like a pun saying that, but to be able to make sure that our resident safety is being put at the forefront. That's all I've got to say. Thanks, Aidan.
Thank you. Stefan, you said that in your report under square lighting that you're going to bring another report to reset the timelines, etc., to the next infrastructure meeting, which I think is going to be November. Is it possible to have that report to be able to be brought to the next MCB meeting on the 19th of October? So that your report and your information can be shared with the MCB, and then it comes to either this table or this table.
I think it's probably more appropriate to come to this first. But we might say, no, go back and do it again, and you're creating expectations for people who actually don't have decision making.
I absolutely understand the need to engage and for the Margaret Community Board to be part of the process, and to keep them informed. I wonder, Mr. Chair, whether, you know, this is a significant decision in terms of financial decision. Whether it may, what I'd also like to propose is that if we're in a position to share information ahead of the next meeting, then we take advantage of that situation. You know, not everything has to be formally brought back. If it can actually just demonstrate that we are thinking and we're working through the problem.
My fear is our next IC infrastructure meetings 15th of November, which it's 2 months, 2 months from now. I would like, you know, ideally like to see some progress before then. And I certainly appreciate, Stefan, that you shared these emails and information with Melissa and myself well before this meeting. Yeah, I'd just like, you know, some movements sooner or later, because every month, every 6 or 7 weeks with the schedules for our meeting, just pushing the troll a few further back. And I think, you know, we've got significant risk. Councillor Mann said someone was collected last month, ended up and was admitted to hospital. But, you know, we've known about the risks for so long. Council as an organisation obviously did their audit beginning of last year, 18 months ago, to find that all our crossings across the whole district we need to be taking action and be seen to be taking action to solve. Well, we've identified the problems. We need to mitigate or remove the problem or the risk. And talking about it is not mitigating the risk.
So in order,
Is
sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just about to say maybe the answer is that Stefan referred to giving us creative autonomy and got work with Tim. I think without wanting to commit to anything firm, because I don't want to speak on behalf of Stefan, but obviously he needs to catch Tim and Stefan across the project, and I think it's worthwhile allowing the two of them some thinking time and seeing what can be shared with this committee informally outside of a meeting beforehand. Would that be agreeable?
appreciate it. Thanks.
Is that all right?
Great, thanks. Now that we've just gone to we covered that one off, shall we have a 10-minute break to stretch our legs before we carry on with the rest of the operations partnership operations report? Is that agreeable with everybody?
Yeah.
Great. So we'll be back here for 3:25 p.m. Thanks.
Yeah.